government fails, the world's off its rails, leaders are whacked, democracy is under attack. It's time to get smart, folks, time to get real. Let's cut through the crap, tell us how you feel. Let's pull back the curtain and open the door. Get some stuff that's not bought and paid for. Let's herd border to border, coast to coast. Let's cue the talent, let's meet the host. Podcast by George.
Hello, hi, how are you? And welcome back to another podcast by George. Another day into COVID-19, the coronavirus sweeping across the country. Everybody's feeling its impact, but the folks that are feeling it, the brunt of it, it's called kind of ground zero. They've called it a petri dish. They've called it a number of things. It's New York City. And joining us on the podcast by George live line, welcoming back, he's a returnee, a great guy out there with a New York state of mind. He's our New York guy. It's Nicholas Powers. Hi, Nick.
Hey, good morning. It's good to see you, George. Thank you very much for having me back on.
I want to formally introduce you for folks that may not have seen the earlier podcast. Nicholas Powers, he's a poet. He's an associate professor of literature at the State University of New York, Old Westbury, with writings in Truth Out, Huffington Post, Alternate, and of course, where I follow him on a regular basis, the Independent, spelled with a Y. Now, Upset Press published his book of journalism, The Ground Below Zero, 9/11 to Burning Man, New Orleans to Darfur, Haiti to Occupy Wall Street. That was published back in 2014. And Nick, there's all kinds of perspectives out there. For instance, yesterday we got some perspective from the President of the United States. Holy buckets. I told people today, I don't watch a lot of his stuff, a lot of his news conferences, but this is such an imminent threat to me and everybody else in the country. I tuned it in yesterday, and I got to tell you something. I'm no longer surprised or amazed or distressed by the number of lies that this guy tells, but the thing about him is how poorly he lies. I mean, I can't believe that guy is that bad at deception and telling lies. This is a guy that wrote a book called The Art of the Deal. A guy, he lies like that. He became a billionaire, a captain of industry, and he can't speak or put together thoughts any more convincingly than that. It always amazes me when I see Donald Trump do that. And I know this guy is extremely well known to you because he's also from New York, right?
Yeah, well, we grew up with him in the 80s and in the 90s. He was always kind of a tabloid fixture, a face on the magazines and in the TV screen. And he was singing even then as kind of a creature from the Black Lagoon of Wall Street. That he was this odd kind of almost caricature of New York. But not of New York, the whole city, but of a very specific celebrity, wealthy tycoon type that is actually part of the history of the city. This city is rife with very kind of quixotic and quirky and outsized characters. And so he kind of fit within the lineage of absurdity in the city. And so we just took him, but we didn't really pay him any more attention than you would pay a piece of, newspaper thrown on the subway seat. It was just in the background. But now, obviously, since he's been elevated to the presidency, and again, I got to tell you, like, seeing him grown up and with his multiple mistresses and his failed deals and his bankruptcies and all that, we had a very different idea of him. We kind of saw him as a failure. But I think because of the TV show to the rest of America, he looked like a great success. So when the rest of America was, kind of drinking the Trump Kool-Aid, the rest of us in New York, and it wasn't because we were Democrats and it wasn't because we were liberal. It's literally because we grew up with the guy. He was like right on the corner. He was in our face. So we were like, I don't know why everyone's taking him so seriously. He's kind of a clown. But I think the rest of America didn't have that intimate, like down the street knowledge of him. So they really kind of bought into the facade and the glitter and the gaudiness because they thought, oh, this guy's a success story. Maybe he'll make me a success. And the rest of us in like Brooklyn, Manhattan, Staten Island, the Bronx, Long Island, we were like, no, no, he will not.
Well,
And guess what, folks? He did not.
and unlike you, I mean, he can't put thoughts together, but I mean, that's extremely well said, Nick. But you're a smart guy. You're a writer, a poet. I mean, you can string some words together. I appreciate that. And we started off talking about the New York state of mind. What is the New York state of mind right now in the middle of this crisis?
The city is holding its breath. The stores are shuttered. They look like steel eyelids. The streets are so quiet. You can hear the birds chirping all day long. Um, People are scared. They're scared because more and more stories of loved ones getting sick, being in the hospital on ventilators. Just the other day, a good friend of mine, he told me he has coronavirus. He's a young guy. He's going to be fine, most likely. His body's going through it, but his dad's older, but his dad's a tough guy. He's going to, tough it out. His mom had some pre-existing conditions, and so she's in the hospital and she has an oxygen mask. And she sent a selfie to my friend, and it really rattled, him to see his mother basically sucking air out of a mask. And that's just one story. And 2 to 3 times a day, all the way into the deep night, I hear ambulances spinning down the street, alarms going down the street as they get someone else who's got coronavirus. So the city is holding its breath because we're so interconnected and we're so piled on top of each other here. Underneath the glamour of New York, it's kind of a shitty city. We're packed together all the time and we're rubbing up against each other all the time. And we deal with it because this is where the opportunity is. But underneath the glamour, there's also a lot of poverty. My mom is a teacher in Queens, and there's a lot of immigrant Chinese and immigrant Mexican. I'm talking about people who literally they take shifts sleeping in the same bed because they can't afford rent. So the New York has always been a very poor city. There's a lot of working class people here, and it has a veneer of glamour because of the publishing industry and the film industry here. But the reality is, it's a working class city, and so we're scared, and we don't know how much of a wildfire this is going to be through the city. So we're kind of holding our breath at this point.
Well, I'm glad you're able to paint that picture for us because a lot of my listeners and people in the part of the country that I live in, they're completely unaware of what it's like out there. Most people around here have never been to New York City. They have no concept. Trump's on television instilling confidence in no one, scaring the bejabbers out of everybody because he's so obviously incompetent. Wall Street reinforces that. The markets have given a complete vote of no confidence. They go straight to the dumpster every time the guy opens his mouth. It's terrifying stuff. Now, one guy that does seem to be out in front of this, that seems to be pretty sharp, who I've looked at, and I like what this guy's saying and doing, is Cuomo, Andrew Cuomo. Talk about him.
Yeah, I think since we can't look to the president's office, the president himself, for reassuring authority and competency during this time, then, obviously your eyes begin to look around for other people who can fill that gap. And, I have to say, I don't actually like Andrew Cuomo's politics. I think he's been very duplicitous in dealing with liberals, even though he himself is technically a Democrat. But, I got to say, the guy is good. At times like this, he is a good crisis manager. He reads the reports. He listens to the experts. He actually talks to a variety of people. So when he speaks, you get a sense of someone who knows what the facts are, who knows the people who are in the different organizations that run the different parts of the city. So he's got a constant stream of information. He knows how to articulate it. He also knows how to have a sense of compassion and humor. And, he talks about his daughter getting tested. He talks about his mom. He jokes around with his brother, Chris Cuomo, on his show. And he's, doing press conferences every single day, almost. And so, he is reassuring. He's a good captain of the state of the city. I hope that the storm of the virus doesn't overwhelm even him. But right now, I feel that he took some very hard, drastic action, which was needed. And he's being consistent in his follow through. And so, I think maybe one of the ways that you can feel yourself being more mature is that I can disagree with the guy's politics, but I can like who he is in terms of his personality and how he conducts himself during a crisis. I think we're lucky to have him.
Again, well said, and that's kind of the perception that I had also. Although I will say this, I saw his presser this morning, and I tell people all the time, don't get your medical information from me. Don't get it from a podcast. Don't get it from a politician, because Cuomo was on there saying kind of a little bit of what Trump was trying to get at yesterday, that if people aren't sick, particularly young people, they can go to work and we can get the economy going again immediately. And I'm like, wow, wait a minute, guys. Now, my understanding of this is you can feel perfectly fine unless you're tested when you go in the door. You could be carrying this virus. You could be infecting others who could then be infecting people that they're not working with, for instance, when they get out in the community. In New York City, my God, you mentioned it briefly, social distancing in a lot of ways in New York City almost isn't possible, right?
Yep. Yeah. And yeah, right now there's a great fear in the high reaches of government and the ruling classes. I'm talking about the CEOs, the high government officials, the wealthy. And that fear is that the millions and millions of workers who don't go to work, who don't get paid, the thousands upon thousands of businesses that get shuttered and shut down, mean that without that income, they can't pay their debts. They can't pay their cell phone. They can't pay their car note, their mortgage. They can't pay their student loans. And all of those institutions that feed off of the debt payments, now they themselves are going to fold like a house of cards. And then the banks that are either next to or on top of those institutions that then bundle those payments and pay someone else. This whole pyramid scheme of late stage capitalism is going to fall like a house of cards with a drunk poker table. And when that happens, you have people who are poor cut off because their other cell phones are off. They can't pay for their gas. What do they do? They're going to go out into the street and protest. But then they're not supposed to go out into the street and protest because they can get people sick.
Yes.
But they're going to go out there anyway. So that means that the sickness is going to explode exponentially, which means people are going to be sick and dying and without access to communication and without access to mobility and debt and poverty. I mean, that's just a powder keg. And so the conservatives, the Republicans who are in charge of the White House and the Senate, see the writing on the wall, which is pretty new for them. And so Mitt Romney, and, God bless his soul, he's a conservative and, I don't like his politics, but he never struck me as a cruel person. Trump strikes me as a cruel person. Romney never struck me as cruel. And he's talking a conversation with Andrew Yang, who's a recent presidential candidate, about temporary UBI, universal basic income, basically giving people like $1,200 a month, so that this way they can start paying some of their debt back, or they can at least have enough money to buy groceries, to get into their cars, get onto the subways, etc. Now, some economists are worried that if you inject a huge amount of money into the economy, that there will be skyrocketing inflation. And we're going to be like in Germany in the 1930s or Zimbabwe, where people were carrying a whole, just like a whole container, a whole bucket of dollar bills, a wheelbarrow full of notes, banknotes. Like you had to take like $1 billion just to get a loaf of bread. And you had to run because by the time you got the money and went to the market, that inflation would have made it twice as much. So at that point, they're worried about that. And I understand that it's a serious worry and things could go that bad. But this is where I think solidarity really has to come in. What the great contradiction that we have facing us is that we have an economic system that's literally frozen in place. It's numbers. And yet everything that you materially need to survive didn't disappear. Food didn't disappear. Gas didn't disappear. Homes didn't disappear. Everything that you need to survive is right there. So we have to have the mental focus and spiritual power to actually look through the panic, focus like a laser beam through the panic, and realize that there's something stronger than everything you're attached to. something stronger than money, stronger than the economy, stronger than all the numbers, and that's human solidarity. If you see someone who's hungry, just feed them. If you see someone who's homeless, give them a place to stay. Doesn't have to be your bed, but give them a place to stay. If you see someone who needs a ride, give them a ride. And what you do is that you create an economy of human kindness, solidarity, and outreach. And that is where the new United States Constitution gets written. It gets written in the actions of people helping each other, not waiting for the numbers to tell them that they can afford to help other people. The only thing that's really going to cure this virus, this pandemic, is love. It's not panic. Don't think that you can hoard panic buy your way out of this. Your little 2 weeks amount of like rice and beans and bread and meat in your freezer, good luck with that. That's going to last like 2 weeks. You think that's going to protect you from hunger? It's not. The only thing that's going to protect you is love. You got to share what you got. Other people will share what they have. And then you'll realize, oh, we actually have enough. We just have to share with each other and then use that solidarity as a way of punching through all of this dead weight that's been on our heads for, God, almost a century now. So that's the one advice I can give to everyone out there. Focus your love like a laser beam through the panic and help people, because that's what's really going to help you through this.
That's great, Nick. And I would say this, that a form of political love really is socialism. And that's what we're seeing. The UBI that's going to help get the economy going again. My God, that's socialism, folks. This free treatment for people that are suffering from COVID-19. That's socialism. That's Medicare for all. That's what Bernie Sanders has been talking about. Now everybody, as soon as there's a real crisis, something that really needs to be solved in our society, where do they run? Do they run to the right? No, they're running to these socialism solutions. Again, that Bernie's been talking about. And before I lose you, Nick, so, you were one of the early on supporters, and we had you on the show earlier talking about the Sanders campaign. Where's that at right now in your mind? What's going to happen next with Bernie?
I think the ideas are going to live beyond Bernie. That Bernie's campaign hit a wall in the South, mostly older Black voters and also older white voters who were scared for different historical reasons, not so much at socialism, but thinking that the rest of the country would go along. In other words, they thought, when you look at the statistics and the polls, many of the older voters actually would like some of what Bernie has to offer, but don't think the country is ready for it. So when they voted against Bernie, they weren't necessarily voting against Bernie. They were actually voting, oddly enough, against the rest of the United States, who they think would not go along with that policy. Now, Bernie's policy, democratic socialism, has been conflated with Venezuela, conflated with the USSR, et cetera, et cetera. And, Martin Luther King Jr. was accused also of, he was a democratic socialist. He was accused of being a closet communist. And his great kind of retort, and I think it's appropriate now, is that, look, every country has a different form of socialism. You can't, like, Norway has a form of socialism. We have forms of socialism in terms of the post office, how we treat our veterans. The military is a form of socialism. The roads are a form of socialism. So every country has a different form of it. I think that the type of socialism that Bernie Sanders is the face of is really kind of humanitarianism. I think that's really more accurate. In other words, there's a deep crisis in this country. And to put it really bluntly, I think America is dying. I think there's a huge amount of white working class pain that's being numbed by opioids in the Bible Belt, in the Midwest, and the Sun Belt. I know that there's a lot of pain in Black and Latino poverty, and the way that comes out is the high homicide rate, gun deaths, and gangs, and some drug use. And I also see that our culture is dying in terms of reality TV shows and kind of trivial storytelling, things that don't really get to the heart of who we are. And so we're lost in the world of superheroes. So I think in many ways our country is dying, but it's also I think parts of it are dying. And yet inside of the country, there's this whole other America that wants to be reborn. And that's the America of solidarity. So socialism to me is really a rebirth of American humanitarianism and solidarity. It's not the Soviet Union with the hammer and sickle, and it's not Venezuela. It's something uniquely American, and it's been inside of us the whole time. And so, Bernie's campaign, At some point, he's going to have to end the campaign. But the ideas are going to live beyond the campaign and beyond Bernie. And then it's our responsibility to do something with them.
God, that's great. I mean, you, you think like I do, Nick, but I think you're better at saying it than I am, and I consider myself to be a former broadcaster and podcaster. Well, this is great. We got to end it today. Man, I want to come back to you sometime soon because this is great stuff. So just in closing here, maybe give us a final remark or two. Again, from a New York City perspective, talking to folks like me and talking to people around the world, really, as to what's happening, where you're at today, and how you guys are going to make it out of this.
I think New York right now has a sense of solidarity that really came out of 9/11. And I saw this after 9/11, like 2003 or 4, there was a blackout. And during that blackout, there was no violence. There was no store windows shattered. There was no theft. There was no rape, no fights. People were outside grilling meat for each other, helping each other. And that was because the spirit of a city had shifted. The spirit of New York had shifted after 9/11. And today there's still a lot of solidarity. People are out the park right down the street from me, and they are giving out food to each other, and they're helping each other. And so what I would say is that the lesson that my city can give to everyone else is that we're definitely going to suffer. And there's going to be people who are going to die in front of our eyes. And there's people who we can help and people whose lives we can save. And we can save more lives because of solidarity. So when the coronavirus hits your town, hits your hamlet, don't try to cure it with paranoia or hoarding. Cure it with love, cure it with solidarity. And when you get to the other side of it, you will be a better person for it. And you'll have a whole new world that you created in the midst of the hardest times.
Folks, that's Nick from New York on his day. God, I love that. Let me give you this little brief bio again. Nicholas Powers, poet, associate professor of literature at the State University of New York, Old Westbury. He has writings in Truth Out, Huffington Post, Alternate, and you can catch him regularly in The Independent. And check out this book. I'll put up an image of The Ground Below Zero, 9/11 to Burning Man, New Orleans to Darfur, Haiti. I don't know why I have trouble with that. Haiti to Occupy Wall Street, published back in 2014. Nick, you shelter safe and well. Take care, my friend. We'll talk again soon.
Thank you so much, George. Stay safe.
That's going to do it, everybody. That's another podcast by George.